Assalamu alaikum and welcome to my journey to Islam on Hikmat TV 24/7 online. It is indeed a pleasure, a blessing and privilege to have Brother Abdul Hakim Robert Hayden. Did I have that correct? Good. So Brother Abdul Hakim is a very interesting brother to talk to about his journey to Islam. He's an expert in acupuncture. We'll talk to him about that. So stay tuned to hear a little bit about Brother Hakim's journey to Islam, his background, before coming into Islam, his experience, and what other advice he has to give to us. So stay tuned, inshallah. So Brother Abdul Hakim, before accepting Islam, and before getting into the whole journey to Islam and life as a Muslim, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from the United States. I grew up outside of Chicago, Illinois. And later on moved to Florida, and that's where I currently reside.
Good. So in Chicago, tell us a little bit about what you did when you were growing up as a young man. Because, you know, our viewers are worldwide. Nowadays, YouTube, Facebook, television, it's all worldwide. So people all over the world are always interested, and they feel and consider it something very interesting to know about people's journey to Islam, what motivated them, where they came from, their background, because sometimes your background has a lot to do with your journey in life. A lot to do, your foundation, your background. So while growing up in Chicago, what were some of the things you loved and you were involved in, etc.?
As is...
I know you probably forget most of it, right?
Yeah, I've been around for a few years.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, I think, you know, I was always very interested in reading. And I grew up in a very kind of a culturally homogenous area. It was the suburbs. There were a lot of people who were, you know, pretty much the same sort of Northern European, Western European sort of ethnicity. And I always took an interest in reading about things that were outside of that. And when I was, I would say, a teenager, I started to feel sort of a curiosity about the spiritual world, about the unseen, about philosophy. I decided that I wanted to start to read more about world religions. I wanted to start to read more about philosophy. At the time, it was the 1970s, and this was the time when kung fu movies were very popular, and you know, Bruce Lee was a very popular figure. And as a teenage boy, this was a very powerful sort of
and you're
sort
right,
of an
because
icon.
karate and kung fu, and especially kung fu, had a lot of meditation, right?
It's a very heavily philosophical, and so as
A deep philosophy
Yeah.
of meditation, contemplation.
exactly. And I think that when I started to, you know, originally, you know, you like the action, but I started to read into the philosophy, and I became very interested in reading Eastern philosophy. And these concepts of yin and yang, these concepts of five elements, and all the different philosophical background later on came up when I decided to study acupuncture. But among the different things that I was reading, and you know, I read a lot of Buddhism, I read these, you know, Taoist and Confucian, these Chinese texts and things, and then I also read, you know, books of the Sufis of, you know, the Middle East and South Asia, and so I was doing a kind of a broad cross section of reading in terms of those things. So that was a very strong interest of mine from the time when I was young.
Interesting. That is really interesting. So before we got on the show, you were mentioning a little bit about your career in music. Tell us about that.
Well, I went
Because,
to,
you know, music, some people contemplated music in a line of spirituality, yeah?
This was a part of my motivation. I had read a book by a very famous musician from India whose name was Hazrat Inayat Khan, and he had written a lot about music as a spiritual discipline, and this is one of the things that had attracted me to the Sufi path. And so when I was in college, I decided to study music so that I could understand things a lot better. There's a lot of things in music. It's not just nice tunes, but there's mathematics, there's physics, and in a way there's a kind of a sacred geometry to music and to composition. So
that's interesting when you look at it from a philosophical point of view.
yes,
Huh?
yes,
Interesting.
absolutely. So I graduated with a major in composition, and after college I played for a while in places in Chicago, mostly clubs, things like that.
So what did you play?
I played a lot of percussion. Actually, I did a lot of drumming. I got interested in some of the sacred drumming, for example, in Brazil and Cuba, and so I got interested in and started to play in some groups that were playing traditional music of those cultures, of the Caribbean and of Brazil, and so I was playing professionally in bands like that, but I decided that I wanted to have something that perhaps I would be a little bit better for me economically, because playing music oftentimes is not necessarily the most secure economic avenue. So I decided to go back to school, and I was walking down the street one day and saw a sign in a window for a Chinese herb shop about acupuncture lessons, and so I went and started that, and so sort of left the idea of playing music behind.
But before we get into the acupuncture, in recent times I have noticed that a lot of people who have been into music started getting into spirituality. Have you realized that?
It's a very spiritual thing, you know. When I took Islam, I took it as
and just for viewers, because viewers can misunderstand what we're talking about.
Sure.
We're talking about music, classical music, music that people really ponder over, not the wild thing that you hear nowadays.
Sure, no,
and
no,
people go crazy with all
Right.
this sort of noise. I will call that noise. But
Yeah.
we're talking about music from a very professional point of view, where it gets your mind, body, and soul involved. I've noticed really recently people start getting into Sufism, spirituality of different levels, who were involved in that kind of music. Have you really had that experience or seen people like that? Because you're now a living example of that.
Yes, you know, when you're playing music and you practice and you practice and you practice, but when it comes time to perform, you start to play the music, and when things are really going well, you sort of forget yourself and you just sort of become the music. And this is sort of analogous to the experience of what Sufis call annihilation or fana, which is that you forget yourself.
Right.
You're making dhikr, you're praising Allah, you're making salawat, whatever it is that you're doing it so intently and with such full presence of the heart that you forget yourself, you forget your ego, you forget everything. So if you've had this experience in playing music, which I had, it then becomes something that you seek in other areas of life other than music. And so, because it's an inherently spiritual thing.
That's interesting, that principle of losing yourself into something. So by adopting that principle into Sufism, or let's say spirituality, it means that your body and mind has been trained how to just get something inculcated into you, and you just become lost into that, in the dhikr of Allah, the meditation, and that depth of concentration, if we want to say that.
And that brings in a kind of transcendence, which is, I think, in a way what the human heart is wanting. We're wanting to have, we like this expansion, we like this transcendence, we like to, why are we believe in Allah? We want to believe in something that's larger than ourselves, that's unlimited, that's timeless, that has no limit. It's freedom. And so this is one of the things I think when people seek this in playing music, it's the same thing really in spirituality.
Wow. So then from music, you went on to acupuncture. Tell us about that. Because that's so interesting. Acupuncture is such a healthy thing.
It is, and for me, it was a way in which, I mean, there's a lot of ways I could have gone, right? I could have become an X-ray technician or something, but really it was, again, a way in which to authentically manifest my interest in Eastern philosophy, and to have a way in which to benefit society.
Yes.
And have it be useful and to be able to make a modest living at it. And so it was something that I became very interested in and very much poured myself into, and graduated from an accredited program, and then I wound up working, and that's been my career now since 1995.
Wow. So you studied acupuncture, you have a license in acupuncture,
Yes.
you're a graduate,
Right.
qualified
Right.
person in the field of acupuncture.
Yes.
Wow. So we could get a lot of healing done for people here now. I'm
Alhamdulillah.
sure a lot of people. So if people call us in Al Hikmat office or calls Al Hikmat studio and would like to get in contact with you, there are people who look at our shows all over the world.
Alhamdulillah.
And people who travel to the United States of America. Maybe they may want you to visit and
Inshallah.
pay your expenses to come to the country or state.
Inshallah.
Would you be willing to do that? Because we have had people on the show that, viewers have been calling them, contacting them for advice, consultation, inviting them to come programs, and I think that might be interesting.
We'll see what Allah makes.
Yeah, especially in today's world with so many different kind of, I don't want to say fake medication, but because a lot of people have been concentrating a lot on the money aspect,
Yes.
the monetary aspect of medication and medicine, that they have forgotten the solution to the problem.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So a little bit about your career in acupuncture now.
Well, I went to school. I got out. I got licensed and began the clinical practice. And I had been doing that for several years. I used to go for a while. I was going to do some foreign study in Japan. There was a group of acupuncturists there who are blind. And so they do everything by their sense of touch, by their other senses. And so I learned some of their methods, which are, again, sort of esoteric, but very practical. And so I specialized in this kind of acupuncture for a while, and then my family decided we would move to Florida. And when I moved when I was in Chicago, I had also started teaching at the school that I had graduated from. And then when I came down to Florida,
Teaching what? Acupuncture?
Acupuncture, yes. And then I became the program director for a school down here, a school in Kendall. And I was teaching acupuncture, Chinese herbs, and writing the curriculum for that, in addition to doing a full-time practice of acupuncture.
Wow. So your office here, where are you located in South Florida?
I'm located in Hollywood, and not far from here. It's on Johnson Street, right by US 441. And it's called Presence Community Acupuncture. The idea is that
Presence Community Acupuncture. That's the name of your office or
yes, that's the name of the company and the name
company.
of the
And you are the
clinic.
president and founder.
I am the president and founder. And the idea of community acupuncture is because a lot of times the people charge a lot for acupuncture, and they can only see one person at a time. I have a room in which I can see many people. People come in, they're fully clothed. I get people coming in niqab, whatever, I'll needle whatever points I can, because the idea of acupuncture is that the energy flows throughout the whole body. So points on the hand can be used to treat the head, for example, or the back, or whatever. And I'm able to keep the price at a reasonable amount. And so that means that people can come in more frequently and they can bring their family. I have a large room where I can accommodate 9 people. And then everything sort of folds up, and so I do several times a month. I hold dhikr there. I hold
interesting.
Right, I hold gatherings for our Sufi community in South Florida.
Wow, that is a blessing. That's blessed acupuncture. Eh? So, I mean, again, just for education, just so that we can benefit, what are some of the things that acupuncture helps?
Acupuncture is very good for almost any kind of pain, almost any kind of inflammation. So if there is an itis in the name, acupuncture can usually be very helpful because we know that it helps to decrease pain, decrease inflammation. So we know that inflammation is a component in many chronic diseases, allergies, asthma, even heart disease. So a lot of times I will see people who have chronic diseases that are not life-threatening types of diseases, but they're chronic diseases where there's inflammation and they're sort of degenerative in nature. So autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or things like that respond very well to acupuncture. Migraine headaches, things of that nature. I see a lot of those kinds of things.
Migraine headache.
Yes, and then what we call is like psycho-spiritual types of problems. I see a lot of people who have difficulties with anxiety. I see people who have difficulties with depression. I have people who have difficulties with managing their emotional states, their anger and things like that. And acupuncture can be very, very useful. Sleep difficulties, many things you can use acupuncture
What about
for.
trigger finger?
Trigger finger?
I'm just calling some points that maybe viewers knowing about it, hearing about it.
Yes.
And I mentioned some of these problems, you know, it might click on our viewers here. So what about trigger finger?
Yes, trigger finger. Things which are of a structural nature. So with trigger finger, you have a shortening of what's called the fascia, the connective tissue in the hand.
Okay.
And if it's, as long as it hasn't gotten to a certain point, then the acupuncture may be able to resolve it completely. It really depends upon the person. So I always tell people to come in and let's have a look. But certainly anything where you're trying to, there's inflammation involved and you're trying to release the connective tissue, the fascia. I always say acupuncture it's better to try it first before just going to the surgeon. Because surgery oftentimes comes with problems of its own. There's recovery time, there's scar tissue. With acupuncture, there's not really any side effects, and
I like that. With acupuncture, there's not really any side effects.
No.
Whereas when you take a surgery, you're going to be cut. You're going to have a lot of side effects after.
Scar tissue, you have to recover from the anesthesia, and there's always a period of recovery. You'll wind up having to go to physical therapy or something like that. Certainly, surgery is life-saving in many instances, and there are some people who come to me and I have to tell them I don't think that the acupuncture is going to be able to work because they may be beyond the scope of acupuncture, and so surgery is necessary. But I always tell people, you know, try conservative measures like acupuncture, or physical therapy, massage or something. Try these things before going to the surgeon.
So acupuncture is a kind of preventative means.
Very much so. I mean, if you could, if people would come in when the symptoms are not quite so dramatic, they would tend to be able to save themselves a lot of suffering down the road, because the acupuncture would probably get rid of those kinds of symptoms pretty quickly, whereas most of the time people wait until they've been to see everybody else and then they go to see the acupuncturist, and sometimes it's something that it's difficult to treat because of the severity of the problem.
What about like something like neck pain?
Neck pain, almost any kind of pain. Anything where you've got neurogenic type of pain, acupuncture can be very useful for. Again, it depends on the condition. And So I usually ask, for example, if they've had any imaging done, if they've had an MRI done or something, and so we can better get an idea of whether or not acupuncture is going to be the best course of treatment for this person. Oftentimes it is. and sometimes it's not. And so the only way to do that is to really be able to talk to the person and
Right, and diagnose the situation as to what stage that pain or problem really is.
Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting. No, that is so interesting to know. I mean, I have always been, that's why I love talking to people of this kind of experience that you have in acupuncture and healing and spiritual healing. I think it is so necessary nowadays time. Once upon a time, people had lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Many yesteryears, as we would say, people were into it. In the recent years, I think a lot of people lost it. But it is so important nowadays, and I have seen it coming back. Have you seen that? People are starting to realize
it's definitely more popular than it was when I started 20 years ago.
People are getting back into herbs and herbal medicine and all these different sort of organic, natural food. I mean, what can you share to our viewers about that? How important it is to get into these natural way of healing?
Well, I think it's important because, there's an awful lot of now in terms of the food. A lot of the food is genetically engineered. It's not the same food that our grandparents ate. It's food that's been treated with a lot of chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers, and things like that. And I'm seeing a lot of people getting interested in things like what's called permaculture. I don't know if you've heard this term, but it's sustainable agriculture. And in some cases, they're doing it even in urban settings. They're doing it in their own backyards and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it really is just taking, understanding what plants grow well with one another. There may be a certain plant that keeps a pest away from another plant, so you'll plant them together. So these kinds of ways that have been forgotten, that have been lost, are coming back again. And this is definitely...
That's like a antibacterial system.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we're looking at a situation where, for example, antibiotics have been overused to the point where now we have infections that antibiotics can't treat. And interestingly enough, part of what I do is Chinese herbs, and there's a lot of research going on in China about combining antibiotics with the Chinese herbs, which have a lot of antibiotic properties to them.
Okay. So we didn't really talk about the Chinese herbs. What can you tell us and our viewers about Chinese herbs?
Chinese herbs, basically, they're natural substances. They're usually combined into a complex formula.
And do we have them available here in America?
Sure, I sell them through my practice. They're considered to be dietary supplements, and so you can buy them online. Anybody can buy them. There is, part of health freedom legislation. They're not. You don't need a prescription to buy Chinese herbs. Right. However, it can be a very complicated science in order to use them properly. And so I usually tell people, if you're interested in Chinese herbs, you should go to somebody who has studied them. My students, or anybody who's been through a proper course of training.
So what are some of the popular Chinese herbs now? What are some of the popular Chinese herbs together with some of the well-known diseases or sicknesses that Chinese herbs are able to heal? I mean, I know it can be anything, it can be everything almost, but what are some of the popular things that you have happening in the West, in America, in the world today that, like they will tell you in America, colon cancer is one of the very well-known, fast-spreading disease in America. I mean, could you give us a few examples of some of these kind of sicknesses, illness that Chinese herbs are known to solve?
Well, interestingly, I mean, when you mentioned cancer, there have been some herbs that have been studied for effects on cancer, but really in China, a lot of times how they treat cancer is they'll use the pharmaceuticals to fight the tumor. The problem with chemotherapy or the problem with radiation is that it sort of kills cells indiscriminately, and so the therapy may be successful, but the patient dies, as they say. So in China, what they'll do is they'll take what are sometimes referred to as tonic herbs, ginseng, astragalus, the reishi mushroom, things like that, and they'll use those to boost the person's immune system and to boost their general vitality, so that they've found that people are able to tolerate the cancer treatments much better when they're taking the Chinese herbs alongside the cancer treatments. Oftentimes what people will do in terms of taking Chinese herbs outside of something like that is, for example, if I'm catching a cold, there's a remedy that I'll use, a Chinese remedy that I'll use called Ganmao Ling. And basically I take that for about half a day, and generally you're able to head the cold off.
Is it a drink?
No, it's pills usually, little tea pills. And you can, I mean, Chinese herbs originally was you gathered a bunch of roots and leaves and things and threw them into a pot and boiled them up and drank the broth. Nowadays, a lot of times when you get Chinese herbs, they're in pill form. They're in little pills or tablets, things like that.
That is interesting. That is really interesting. I mean, I have really always been mesmerized with herbs and natural healings. I love that. I really, I'm a person, I love mountains and the oceans, and I think everybody likes that, but I'm very much into those kind of things as opposed to the concrete jungle.
Yes, of course.
So that's why herbs and natural healing and acupuncture, I'm really very attracted to that. And I think it is so important and so very educational for the world today.
Yes,
for the people in the world, because a lot of people don't know about it. They don't know about it. And they probably heard it, they must have seen it somewhere, but they have not really contemplated and studied it to have a better idea on these natural resources that Allah has provided. And that's the bottom line. Allah has created the human body, and He is the Khalik, He is the creator. So if He created this human body, He is the most wise, who knows the best medicine and the best way to heal and to prevent diseases. And I think that's what people have lost out there.
I think so.
And that's the physical aspect.
Yes.
Now we got to get into your journey to Islam, the spiritual aspect. Now we have been speaking, Brother Hakeem, for over 25 minutes now. Yeah. We have been speaking for over 25 minutes. So we got a short break. We're going to go on a short commercial break. After we come back, we want to talk a little bit on what motivated you to come to the fold of Islam. What motivated you to get into spirituality, and how has your life changed after you came into the fold of Islam. So stay tuned. When we come back after the short break, we will be talking to Brother Abdul Hakim about his journey to Islam, what motivated him, and how his life has changed after becoming a Muslim, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to my journey to Islam on Hikmat TV 24/7 online. And once more again, it is a pleasure to have with us in Hikmat studio Brother Hakim Robert Hayden. And for those of you who have just tuned in, Brother Hakim is a professional. He's an expert in acupuncture, and it is a blessing to have him share his journey to Islam as he came into the fold of Islam, his connection and philosophical views on spirituality, his experience in acupuncture we spoke about before we went to the short break. So we are now going to talk a little more on the spiritual aspect with Brother Hakim. So Brother Hakim, tell us here now. You have been a musician, acupuncture, we spoke about that before the break. Tell us what motivated you in your journey to Islam.
As I said, I, for a long time, was interested in philosophy from being a teenager, really. And I read many different books and sought to understand different viewpoints. As I mentioned, I read a lot of Eastern philosophy, a lot of Buddhism, and in that I'd also read into Islam, particularly the mystical branch of Islam, Sufism, and as well as other things, books on Kabbalah, some books on, or indigenous religions, African religions, all manner of things. And
So what faith were you practicing before becoming a Muslim?
I wasn't really practicing. I was just seeking, I think.
Okay, so you were not really connected officially to any religion or so?
No, in the 80s, into the 90s, the New Age became very popular. And there was a lot of people, I think, who were sort of disaffected by organized religion, who became involved in the New Age. And I used to hang out at a lot of New Age bookstores and buy a lot of books and read a lot of those things. Everybody sort of styled themselves as a spiritual seeker, and it was very popular to kind of like build your own religion. People would take parts of religions that they liked, and they would discard the parts of the religions that they didn't like. I like what you said.
There are a lot of people who say, listen, I do not belong to a religion, but I'm very spiritual. They just don't like this organized. Well, it's not a matter of the organized. We call it organized, but they cannot handle the politics and the rituals and confusion that goes on without any basic evidence of spirituality with some goal and objective in life.
There's a lot of, I think, dissatisfaction with the fact that in a lot of religious organizations, the human heart, the emotional life, the spiritual life is really downplayed, and there's a lot of ritual and law or things like that are sort of overemphasized.
I don't want to shift from the topic. We still have to continue on your journey to Islam. But we have that problem in Islam also.
Of course.
There are a lot of people who concentrate in the masjid, bricks, paint, tiles, the chandelier, and they're all about how they build this masjid. And they are not into building the community.
Yes.
And there may be those who are into building a large number of people in a community, but not into building the spirituality in the community.
Yes.
So they have lost the whole mission of the masjid.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
And we see people doing that in the church.
Yes.
In the temples, in the other faiths, that it's all about that secular aspect. And I want to use the word secular, which really in the dictionary means non-religious. So they are into the secular aspect in the religion as opposed to spirituality. And that has created a major problem. I do have a problem when I see Muslims wasting money, wasting time, wasting effort. Their vision is all about, not that we don't need the building, not that we don't need the space, but the kind of money, the kind of time that they put into these things. I want to believe if they would put it into spirituality, if they would put it into salah, into prayer, the masjids will come.
Yes, I think
the masjids will be built, because you will build people. And when people's iman is built, iman, spirituality, then these people will automatically build the physical structure around them.
People are looking for connection, and that's part of the thing. And they're not necessarily looking for an outward aspect of it. They're looking for real heart connection with things. And so people want to feel connected with one another, or they want to feel connected with the community, or they want to feel connected with Allah. And that's, I think, what's missing in many cases.
And that's what I thought that I got to share that with you, because I've seen it in Islam, and I know people talk about it in other religions, but in Islam, Muslims do that. It has nothing to do with Islam, but it's the people.
Yes, of course, humans are
so you have seen this kind of thing, and you have always been attracted to spirituality, and I'm sure you probably have that same look of these problems in the Muslim world, where a lot of people concentrate on the wrong things.
Yes, yeah.
Good. So now, being a person of spirituality, let's hear some of these steps. And I just wanted to shift on that because you mentioned it. And I tell our people, I try to think how the viewers are thinking. So I will ask you and I will interject questions so that we get a little more into the minds of the viewers as they are thinking. So we got that over. The organized church and organized religion.
Well, I think in what my experience happens with having a kind of a buffet style spirituality is that
I like the terminology. Buffet style.
You don't really get a balanced meal, right? You can just hang out by the cookies or something. You can just, you don't really get all the protein and vegetables and things. So ultimately, when I would try and put these things together, it was like building a monument to my own self. It wasn't it wasn't facing Allah at all. It was facing me. And so I think this is one of the things that is a pitfall of that kind of approach. And I decided that this was not going to get me anywhere. I'd been doing this for years and years. And so I decided that I had to take a path. I had to take an organized program of spiritual study. And so I set out to find one of those. And again, I'd read many different traditions, and one of the things that I considered for many years, because I read a lot into it, was Buddhism. Buddhism is a very interesting faith, and there is a lot of, it's really all about your spiritual development.
A lot of meditation.
Right. There was one key aspect that was missing for me, and that was I had to ask myself, do I believe there is a God? Do I believe in God? And the answer was yes, that ever since I was a child, I'd always felt this presence. I'd always felt protected. I'd always felt like there was something that kept me from making all of these really bad choices I could have made along the line. There was a hand that was guiding me, and I couldn't ignore this feeling. So for me, in terms of looking at the programs of spiritual study that were available and the religious, let's say aqidah, right, the belief that was behind it, Islam, to me, it's about tawheed. It's very straightforward. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so in terms of a course of study, we have what's called the tariqah, which is the path, and this is generally done under the guidance of a guide. And so I happened to be talking to a colleague of mine, another acupuncturist, and she mentioned that her guide was going to come to South Florida and have a kind of a
So this is how many
gathering.
years ago?
This was in 1990. This was in 2006.
Okay.
This is in 2006, and I was already had been in South Florida teaching and things like that. I had a lot of students, and I remember talking to her, and I'd already known quite a bit about Islam.
She was a Muslim.
She was a Muslim, and she was a student of this sheikh, and I remember talking to her, and I remember saying, I believe Islam is true, and I'm very interested in Sufism, but there's no way that I'm going to be able to quit drinking and start praying 5 times a day.
I like that. My goodness.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. And alhamdulillah, I decided, okay, I actually got the basics of praying, learned how to do it, and I went to the conference, and I met this sheikh, and it was actually after hearing him speak, but we broke for, I believe it was Dhuhr or Asr, one of the two, and I sort of learned the motions, but I'd never really prayed, and so I lined up, and they dragged me over and put me right next right next to the men, and we prayed, and it was while I was doing the salah that there was this feeling like, this is it for me.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah.
And I prayed. I stopped drinking and started praying 5 times a day.
Wow.
From that point, it was a very, very strong experience. The whole weekend, the sheikh talked a lot, and I took what's called bay'ah with him, which is that he would be my teacher, and at the same time I made shahada, because I realized sometimes that people will take bay'ah, they won't make shahada for many years later, but for me I wanted the whole thing. I know that there's no separation between, we say, the sharia, the tariqah and the haqiqah, you know. So it was all part of one. So to be honest and authentic about it, I took Islam at the same time. So I made shahada and I took bay'ah.
So 13 years now,
Yes.
you have been a Muslim.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Subhanallah. So how, that is interesting, how Allah just guided you and led you on, and boom, it just happens, and you change, and so you gave up drinking alcohol from there and there.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting, Wow. Anyhow, so after you accepted Islam, how did you feel?
Well, I wanted to, I wanted it.
What were some of the hard practices you had to give up? One was drinking. Yes, let's see.
Well, those are like the giving up the, taking the pillars basically. Praying 5 times a day. Of course, you have to stay away from, I'm never much of a pork eater, but I stay away from alcohol and things like that. In some ways, those types of things they're obvious, and in some ways, those types of things are easy. It's the little things that you have to stay away from, like backbiting or gossip, or not even listening to it, or just staying, not getting angry. All of these wisdoms that we get from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then this is all part of what in the Sufi path is called the tazkiyat an-nafs, the purification of the soul. And it's something that goes on day after day, 24/7.
That is so deep that you have mentioned that, Brother Hakeem. That yes, a lot of people, it's easy to give up the basic big things. But these things that look like small things, slandering, backbiting, getting angry, having a bad attitude, these are very destructive things.
Extremely.
These are so destructive. They destroy your faith. They destroy your amal, your good deeds, all the efforts that you put down. People spend money in zakat and charity. They perform hajj. They fast 30 days. They pray 5 times a day. But these little things that look little are major destructive things. Like the Prophet ﷺ put it, it's like a razor that shaves off hair.
Yes.
The hair, the virtues, and the razor, they just destroy things. They destroy things. And I think that's where the spirituality, and I'm saying this because of the spirituality, because listen, I'm very modern, I'm very technological. That's why I love media, TV, because I love this because of dawah. You can use something, an instrument, for dawah, for good. You can use a knife to commit murder.
Right.
You can use a knife to cook and cut onions and, and vegetables, right? So therefore, I love the media for spreading the message of Islam. That's why I love sitting with people, talk about spirituality, Islam, journey to Islam. I think that is so motivational to our viewers worldwide. And Brother Abdul Hakim, we got a lot of comments. People worldwide, are so motivated when they hear people like you, how you came to Islam, how you were motivated. Do you know it helps people who are Muslims and who are not practicing? It motivates them. When a person hears that you went, met someone, listened to a lecture about spirituality, stood in Salah, you were not a Muslim then, officially, formally, Allah knows, and boom, you accepted Islam immediately, you gave up things like alcohol. You may have a Muslim who says he's a Muslim, but he just cannot stop. And when he hears that, it will motivate him. And I think that Allah has blessed you, really. That's a great blessing. And that point of, slandering, backbiting, getting angry, bad attitude, these are things that really spirituality destroys. The dhikr of Allah, this meditation, it really destroys, as you were saying a little while ago, about the nafs. It gives you the purification of your nafs, your desires. It removes those things.
Yeah, it removes the rust from the heart, we say.
Wow. So I'm looking at the time here. We got a couple minutes. Again, time just go. We are just almost 20 minutes. So tell us a little more of how your life has changed after becoming a Muslim.
I continue to I continue to study. One of the things that I love about Islam is that the knowledge is so vast. Every day I'm reminded of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is dua to say, Ya Allah, increase me in knowledge. And so every day I try and do a little more, learn something more, try to do more dhikr, and try and just polish my heart and be a good person. Alhamdulillah, we have a community of beloveds, of the Sufi community in South Florida, and we'll do gatherings and things in my clinic and in other places. And if anybody is interested in coming and making dhikr of Allah, they're more than welcome to come to my clinic. They can get in touch with me, and if they're going to be in South Florida and they'd like to participate in our remembrance, then they're more than welcome.
Wow. So again, anyone who would like to be part of this spiritual group, they can feel free to contact you, or they can call us in the office.
Even if they just want to sit in the corner and listen to us, that's fine too. It's all about,
they are welcome to come.
They're welcome to come. Everybody is welcome, and we're really all about just remembering Allah and spreading the love.
Right. So I think for viewers out there, anyone who would like to join this spirituality with Brother Hakeem and a whole bunch of other brothers and sisters, feel free to contact us at Al Hikmat office. We will share his number and the means and ways that you can get connected so that you can join, because we're all here with spreading the message. And spirituality is so deep, and I think it is so important. I wish I could be talking to people on spirituality in every talk show, because it really moves your heart, and it gets you so connected to Allah, which is what people have been losing nowadays. And you made that point in other beliefs and other research that you made. They had meditation, but you did not see that connection to Allah. It was right down here. It did not have that connection to the Supreme Being, Allah. And I like the point you just mentioned, and I'm just repeating it so that our viewers, they can contemplate a little more. You mentioned that Islam is very deep, that it makes you go into depth of thinking. So all this sort of philosophy that you were thinking about when you were a teenager, the more you study the Quran, the more you study the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are able to see that philosophy there.
And it's an ocean. So there's grammar, Arabic, there's fiqh, there's all manner of subjects, kalam, there's all kinds of things, ways that you can go. I've known people who've been in the path of people who've been in Islam and they've dropped out and they've gotten into yoga or they've gotten into other things or whatever. And whenever I look at our tradition, I think it has everything. It lacks nothing. Allah has completed our religion, and this is it. I mean, you don't need to go anywhere else. It's all here for you, and Allah is here for you always, closer than your jugular vein. Alhamdulillah.
You're so right, Brother Abdul Hakim, that sometimes I tell people who study Islam, like scholars and sheikhs, etc., I'm like, you guys have spent 7 years, 10 years studying Islam. People who memorize the Quran. And why do you have to do something else other than being involved? You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of people, if they're not the imam in the mosque or the masjid, or they're not a teacher in the school or the masjid, then they find other career, another profession. And I'm like, you're in such a profession and career of Islam that you have studied it and you got this knowledge. It is so deep that if you go into this ocean of Islam and you've studied it, but if you go into it, there's so many areas in Islam that scholars and huffaz can get involved in that there's no end to it. The philosophy, the depth, so many things you can do. Dawah, studying the spirituality, Quranic medicine. People say prophetic medicine, but it's really Quranic medicine.
It is.
What the Prophet, peace be upon him, ate and lived by, it's what Allah has taught him to do. So Islam is so deep, and I really share that with you 100%, that people need to contemplate on the depth of Islam. It is so powerful. It is so powerful for your mind, your body, and your soul. So as we have come to the end of the show, you got a couple of seconds. What advice you would like to give to myself and our viewers worldwide?
Know that Allah is always with you. Know that Allah loves you and surrounds you. He's always there for you. And remember Him. Remember Him as often as you can. Remember Allah with every breath if you can.
So thank you very much, Jazakallah, Brother Abdul Hakim.
Why, yeah.
So for our viewers out there, if you have just tuned in, we have been speaking to Brother Abdul Hakim Robert Hayden, and he has a professional business in acupuncture, which is called Presence Community Acupuncture. And we spoke to him about his journey to Islam and all his experience in life, and all the advice that he could have shared with us and our viewers. And it has been a pleasure to have him with us on the show, My Journey to Islam, on Al Hikmat TV. So stay tuned, Al Hikmat TV 24/7 online. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.